My dad beat me on my 18th birthday, then acted shocked when I disappeared Reddit stories. One moment I was standing in my childhood kitchen, the next I was packing a backpack in silence with nowhere to go. Walking out didn't feel dramatic, it felt overdue. Hi, I'm Nolan, 22 now, but the story really starts 4 years ago on my 18th birthday, the night my dad beat the adulthood out of me before I'd even had a chance to use it. And yeah, I know that sounds dramatic, but you try getting slammed into a refrigerator while someone screams you're a failure not worth celebrating, then tell me it's exaggerated. Anyway, let me take you back. Turning 18 was supposed to feel like freedom. For most people it's cake, keys to a used car, maybe a half-hearted family dinner at Applebee's. For me, it was a countdown clock. 3 years I'd waited for that number, the age where they couldn't drag me back home or hide behind our house, our rules. And I didn't grow up in some cartoonishly terrible shack with peeling paint and feral dogs. Oh no. We were the kind of family people pointed at and said, "They look so put together." 2-story craftsmen, spotless hedges, a mailbox so polished it probably had better self-esteem than I did. From the street, you'd think we hosted picture-perfect Christmas cards. Inside? Inside it was like living in a 3-person fan club for my younger brother Evan, and I was the neighbor kid accidentally invited. The golden child. Coaches loved him. Teachers adored him. My parents acted like he descended straight from heaven wearing Nikes and a smug expression. The kid could punch a hole through drywall, and my mom would ask if he needed a snack. Meanwhile, I once left a towel on the bathroom floor and got a TED Talk about how I was single-handedly destroying the fabric of the household. And because life has a sense of humor, Evan wasn't just younger, he was miracle baby younger. After 3 losses, he came out perfect, shiny, flawless. And I? Well, I was the practice round. By 17, I'd mastered the art of existing without making a sound. Move quietly, speak gently, anticipate needs before they were voiced. If I did everything right, the best I could hope for was neutrality. My dad had this signature expression he wore only for me, a mix of irritation and disappointment, like he'd smell-tested milk and knew it was going bad but was still mad about it. So when my 18th birthday rolled around, I wasn't expecting balloons. But I also wasn't expecting what actually happened. I came downstairs that morning and walked right into a celebration. Just not for me. My dad was tying a silver ribbon around a sleek black box like he was prepping it for a magazine shoot. My mom had her camera out. Evan was bouncing like a caffeinated golden retriever. Nobody even glanced at me. I could have walked in juggling flaming chainsaws and they'd have stepped over me to get a better angle of their precious boy. It took a full painful minute before my mom went, "Oh, perfect timing, honey." Not for me. For Evan. He ripped open the box and pulled out, I kid you not, a stainless steel watch that cost more than 3 months of my paychecks at the hardware store. The kid who barely passed gym got a luxury timepiece. For what achievement? Breathing. They beamed. They clapped. They ruffled his hair. Meanwhile I stood there waiting, stupidly, for someone to remember what day it was. My mom finally glanced at me and said, "Don't look so bitter, Nolan. Life isn't about material things. Character matters more." Character. Right. Easy to say when you're gifting Rolex cousins to your favorite child. Then Evan chimed in. "We had cake earlier. You were sleeping." A joint cake, apparently. With his name on it. On my birthday. Something cracked. Quietly. Like a wire snapping. I said one sentence too loud. Then another. Then every bottled-up truth I'd swallowed for 18 years came out all at once. You know the rest of that part, the shove, the punches, the words that cut more than the hits. "You're a failure not worth celebrating." That was the last thing my father ever said to me as his son. I'm not going to glamorize what happened next. I didn't storm out with cinematic music or throw down some epic speech. I packed a backpack with whatever I could grab, took the $180 I'd hidden, and slipped out the back door at 2 a.m. In the span of 6 hours, I went from unwanted child to technically homeless adult. And here's the thing nobody tells you. When you grow up being treated like you're replaceable, leaving doesn't feel dramatic. It feels quiet. Icy. Clarifying. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't being watched. I wasn't being judged. I wasn't being compared to Evan. For the first time, I wasn't someone's disappointment. I was just Nolan. And I had no idea yet, absolutely none, that walking away from that house would be the single best decision of my life. But I also had no idea how far they'd go to erase me. And how far I'd go to make them regret it. So here's the fun part nobody warns you about when you fantasize about leaving home forever. You don't magically become an independent adult with a stable job and a studio apartment overlooking a river. You become a guy sitting in a 24-hour diner at 3 a.m. nursing a refillable coffee because it's cheaper than renting a room in hell. Night 1 was shock. Night 2 was humiliation. Night 3 was hunger. Night 4 was survival mode. I wasn't dramatic about it. I didn't cry on street corners or write poetry on napkins. I just existed. Quietly. Strategically. The same way I'd learned to exist at home. I mapped out safe places. The diner on Route 12, warm, no questions. The public library, outlets everywhere. The YMCA bench, surprisingly private after 1 a.m. Bus Route 49, ran all night, perfect for sleeping upright without getting questioned. I knew how to keep my head down. Turns out, that's a transferable skill. By day 4, I smelled like a backpack someone forgot in a locker room. My phone was clinging to 6% battery. My stomach kept making noises loud enough to register on seismic equipment. That's when I found the church shelter downtown, the kind of place with plastic cots, lukewarm soup, and volunteers who've seen everything and don't flinch when a kid shows up with a split lip and a backpack full of granola bars. The intake guy was in his 60s, big hands, soft eyes, a world-weary patience. He didn't ask who hit me or why I left. Didn't say, "You should call home." He just handed me a blanket and said, "Cot in the back. Lock up your bag." Honestly, that alone almost made me cry. Adults who ask nothing are rare. Adults who trust you without knowing you are even rarer. 11 days I stayed there. 11 days learning skills you don't want to put on a resume. How to sleep without rolling off a noisy plastic cot. How to stretch $3 into 2 meals without becoming a magician. Which vending machines double drop items if you tilt your weight just right. How to leave a place exactly as you found it so nobody notices you're there. During the day, I applied for every job under the sun. Hardware stores, restaurants, warehouses. Places that needed bodies more than resumes. When the call finally came, a medical supply distribution center off Highway 47, I almost dropped the cheap library phone charger I was borrowing. They hired me on the spot. Not because I was impressive, but because I showed up early, tucked my shirt in, and said, "Yes, sir," like I meant it. Sometimes that's enough. The warehouse became my whole world. Huge, loud, freezing in the winter, boiling in the summer. Boxes stacked so high you'd swear they violated OSHA just for sport. Forklifts beeping everywhere. Managers yelling, "Move with purpose," even though none of them had left their office chairs in hours. And then there was the landlord. The intake guy from the shelter, the one with the tired kindness, lived alone in a modest house with a converted shed out back. He mentioned it one night while stacking canned goods. I asked how much? He said $120 a week. Utilities included. No lease, no questions. I moved in the next morning. To be clear, converted shed is generous. It used to be a storage room that, at some point, lost an argument with a family of spiders. It smelled like motor oil and distant regret. The space heater only worked if you prayed over it first. The mattress had a personality and none of it good. But it was mine. No yelling. No slammed doors. No Evan. Most nights I walked to the library to apply to community college. I wrote essays on my phone like some kind of academic raccoon hunched over a study desk. Every application fee felt like a punch to the ribs, but I paid them anyway. And for the first time in my life, I let myself imagine a future. A small one at first. A fragile one. But mine. Then, just as things were starting to feel survivable, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. From my dad. The man who'd punched me in the ribs on my birthday like he was trying to knock the candles out of me. "Nolan, come home. Please. We can talk." He wasn't apologizing. He was panicking. And for the first time in my existence, my father needed something from me. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the end. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny act, that flick of my thumb, was the first stone in the avalanche that would bury them. Because they hadn't even started trying to ruin my future yet. And I hadn't even started planning how to ruin theirs. By week 6 in the shed, I was doing something dangerously close to thriving. Not in a glamorous way, more in an "I no longer smell like a wet backpack and I'm not sleeping on plastic" way. But for someone who'd started adulthood hiding behind a YMCA, that was progress. Work was steady. I showed up early. I kept my head down. I did the shifts nobody wanted. That's how the warehouse manager, a mountain of a man with forearms like braided steel cables, started moving me off the grunt line and into inventory control. A job that required fewer biceps and more brain cells. A job I didn't know I could do until I did it. Then came the night everything changed. The entire inventory system crashed, screens glitching, error messages blinking like the building was having a panic attack. This was 15 minutes before a major compliance deadline for a hospital shipment. The kind of shipment that, if delayed, racks up a 5-figure penalty. Everyone was spiraling. Forklifts stopped mid-aisle. Supervisors started sweating through their uniforms. The manager was on the phone with HQ screaming in a tone that suggested he was prepared to fistfight God. And I, the guy who slept in a repurposed broom closet, noticed something. The error message. It wasn't random. It wasn't catastrophic. It was a corrupted data table. That's it. Just data misbehaving. I had spent late nights at the library teaching myself spreadsheets and basic database troubleshooting. Not because I planned to be useful, but because the library offered free heat and I needed something to stare at. So I walked over. "You mind if I try something?" I asked. They stared at me like I'd announced I was about to perform brain surgery with a spork. But the manager was desperate. "Fine. Go." 15 minutes later, the system rebooted. All green lights. No penalties. No disaster. The warehouse didn't cheer. Warehouses don't cheer. But there was a moment of collective breathing, like we'd all narrowly avoided being flattened by a corporate semi-truck. The manager slapped my back so hard my soul briefly left my body. "You just saved us $25,000, kid." Word spread like gossip in a church parking lot. People started asking me how to fix things. Supervisors learned my name. Coworkers said thank you instead of move. I wasn't the invisible kid anymore. I wasn't the mistake. I wasn't the failure. I was useful. But here's the twist. Just when life started opening doors, my parents slammed one directly in my face. It happened on a Tuesday, which feels appropriate because Tuesdays are cursed. I got an email from my high school counselor. "Nolan, your transcript request has been canceled. Your parents contacted the school to state you're not pursuing higher education. They've asked we close out your file." I read it. Reread it. Waited for the words to rearrange into something less insane. They had called the school. They had blocked my college records. They had tried to stop my future. Not because they cared. Not because they wanted me home. Because Evan was college-bound soon, and God forbid the wrong son succeed first. 3 scholarships I'd applied for were now out of reach. Deadlines had passed. Windows had closed. For the first time since leaving home, I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't even angry. I was focused. Because that day, In that shed that smelled like dust and triumph, I realized something life-altering. My family wasn't done hurting me, but I was done letting them. The survival instincts I'd lived on turned into something sharper, colder, strategic. They wanted to erase me from the future? Fine. I'd erase myself from their past, and make sure they felt the empty space I left behind. They didn't know it yet, but the countdown had started. And the next move was mine. The day after I learned my parents tried to bury my future in bureaucratic paperwork, something in me shifted. Not a dramatic movie moment, more like a quiet internal click. The kind you only notice because suddenly everything is sharp, clear, organized. Rage turned into strategy. Hurt turned into fuel. And the kid they'd spent 18 years stepping on? He stood up. I didn't start with revenge. I started with infrastructure. Budget spreadsheets. Application deadlines. Overtime shifts. Library hours. Financial aid appeals. Everything color-coded like an accountant with unresolved issues. It wasn't glamorous. It was grinding. But it worked. I fixed what my parents tried to sabotage. Reopened my records. Resubmitted documents. Explained to financial aid why my dependency override should be approved. The caseworker took one look at my shelter letter and said, "Oh, yeah. Absolutely." By December, I'd collected enough overtime hours to pay spring tuition out of pocket. I didn't celebrate, not really. I was too busy surviving. But I did allow myself one luxury, buying a $1.29 cinnamon roll at the corner store. Best terrible pastry I've ever eaten. Then the warehouse manager started rotating me into logistics coordination, not just inventory. Real work. Real responsibility. Problems that required thinking, not just lifting. And because the universe has a sense of timing bordering on theatrical, it was around then that things escalated. Evan found me. Not physically, digitally. God bless the stupidity of mediocre men with Wi-Fi. At 2 months into community college, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was him. "Heard you're working some grocery job and going to community college." Elmio. Then another. "You know what I did to your room? Check this out." And then the photo. My old bedroom, painted over, staged, wiped clean of 18 years of my existence. He sat in the center of it like a smug raccoon who'd found a shiny object. Caption: "Cleared all your garbage. Looks way better now." I didn't feel anger. Anger is hot. This was cold. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to feel powerful. I gave him nothing. But I did something better. I went digging. Everyone has their public weaknesses. Evan's was astonishingly easy to find. The boy had a second Instagram account, a Finsta, with a username so lazy it basically screamed, "Please subpoena me." In the highlights? Months of self-incriminating stupidity. Videos bragging about cheating on exams. Screenshots of plagiarized essays. Brags about faking community service hours. Group chats admitting he paid someone to write an English paper. A slide labeled, "LOL, do they even check?" I screenshotted everything. Username visible. Timestamps visible. Context intact. Dropped it all into a folder on my laptop titled Receipts, because professionalism is important when you're planning a long-term psychological demolition. But Evan wasn't the real target. He was just a door. The real target was my parents. The house. The mortgage. The foundation problems. The flooding incidents they never disclosed. The permit history my dad tried to bury. The fact that they were months behind on payments. Everything was public record if you knew where to look. And I had time. I had resentment. I had motivation. A dangerous combination. My old friend from high school, the data analytics guy, agreed to help me pull deeper records. Nothing illegal, just efficiently thorough. He found insurance claims, HOA complaints, contractor disputes. Basements flooded so often the county probably recognized the address. Repairs temporary. Disclosures non-existent. Liability catastrophic. And then, something unexpected happened. In January, the college invited me to speak at their first-gen student showcase. A whole event celebrating students who'd built their futures without parental support. They wanted me to speak. On stage. In front of faculty and families. They wanted my story. My story? The one my parents tried to smother. That's when the revenge stopped being theoretical. Because I realized something perfect. If I played this right, my parents would lose everything they tried to protect. At the exact same moment, the world congratulated me for escaping them. A clean split screen of karma. Them sinking. Me rising. Not with violence. Not with screaming. Just with truth. Truth is the slowest, quietest, most devastating form of revenge. And I had a lot of it. The first-gen student showcase was scheduled for late October, a date that started pulsing in my brain like a countdown clock. Every step between January and October felt like preparing for an event that wasn't just a speech, but an alignment. A moment where my life would split cleanly into before and after. And the beautiful part? I didn't have to drag my parents into the aftermath. They were already sprinting toward it with Olympic enthusiasm. Because while I was building a degree, a resume, and a spine, they were building foreclosure. I didn't know that yet, not fully. But the signs were already there. The house had been relisted 3 times. The asking price kept dropping. Open houses were popping up like whack-a-moles. Multiple contracts fell through. And once I dug into the documents, I knew why. Undisclosed structural issues. Basement flooding events. Foundation cracks. Temporary patches passed off as repairs. All legally required to be disclosed, none actually disclosed. Their entire image, the beautiful 2-story craftsman with the perfect hedges and the miracle child, was held together by the duct tape equivalent of denial. By early fall, I had gathered enough documentation to qualify as a petty, one-man regulatory agency. My case file binder was thick enough to stun a medium-sized raccoon. And honestly? Cathartic. There's nothing like flipping through a tab labeled Foundation Problems, while sipping discount coffee and contemplating generational collapse. Then one afternoon in September, a former neighbor messaged me on LinkedIn. Not sure if you want to know, but your parents just listed the house again. Hope you're doing well. Oh, I was doing beautifully. Curiosity got the better of me. I checked Zillow. There it was, professionally staged, professionally photographed, fake smiles practically embedded in the drywall. Charming family home with character. I clicked through the images. That's when my stomach dropped. My room. Except it wasn't my room. Neutral beige walls. Generic hotel art. A desk staged with fake college brochures, all with Evan's name on them. A space curated to suggest a promising future. Just not mine. In one photo, I swear you could still see the indent on the wall where I'd once taped my favorite band poster, covered now by a tasteful watercolor, which honestly felt like adding profanity to injury. And the treehouse I'd built with my uncle when I was 13? Gone. Erased. Torn down because it didn't match the aesthetic. It was like walking into my own past only to find my footprints scrubbed out with bleach. Standing in my borrowed dress shirt at the open house, I noticed a stack of plastic bins shoved behind a treadmill. Most were labeled neatly. Holiday decor, kitchen overflow, Evan keep. But 3 in back? Donate old room junk. Miscellaneous. And the smallest bin. Trash. Trash. My entire childhood, condensed, categorized, and tossed aside behind a broken treadmill like it was physically embarrassing to acknowledge I'd ever existed. That night, sitting in my car outside the house, the humiliation finally crystallized into something else, something sharp, controlled, professional. If they wanted to turn me into a ghost, fine. But I was going to haunt them. And not loudly. Not impulsively. No yelling, no fists, no melodrama. Real revenge is slow. Real revenge is patient. Real revenge is paperwork. The next 2 weeks were a master class in subtle destruction. I assembled everything: permits, inspection notes, HOA disputes, insurance claims, photos, timestamps, inconsistencies, and disclosure forms. I packaged it like a legal grenade, ready to detonate on contact. And then Evan handed me the match. Because his Finsta wasn't just a digital scrapbook of bad decisions, it was a guided tour through his academic fraud. Perfect ammunition. Not to destroy his life, just to tilt it gently off its pedestal. An anonymous packet to the admissions integrity office of each school he applied to. Subject line: Academic conduct concern regarding applicant Evan. I attached the screenshots. Bragging about cheating. Laughing about faking volunteer hours. Messages admitting he had someone else write his essays. Not a death sentence, just enough to raise eyebrows, delay decisions, and plant the seed. Something here isn't right. And while I queued that up, the dates circled on my calendar drew closer. October. The showcase. My name chosen for a featured profile. My stories shared campus-wide. A highlight reel of survival in front of hundreds, including, indirectly, my parents. A spotlight for the son they'd erased. And while I stood on that stage, smiling for cameras, telling the world about resilience and independence, somewhere, queued in a buyer's inbox, my anonymous package was landing. This property contains undisclosed structural and foundational damage. The sellers are aware. 2 narratives unfolding in parallel. Mine rising. Theirs collapsing. It felt almost poetic. And October was only the beginning. October arrived like it knew it was important. Crisp air, leaves turning gold, the kind of weather that makes people nostalgic even if their lives are a mess. Mine wasn't a mess anymore. It was aligned. Sharpened. Like every choice I'd made since I walked out that back door was leading here. The first-gen student showcase was on a Thursday afternoon in the campus auditorium, a massive room with too many lights and chairs that squeaked if you breathed. When I stepped backstage, I felt this strange, steady calm. Not confidence, exactly. More like, I've survived worse. My professor squeezed my shoulder. Just speak truth, she said. Truth I could do. I'd lived in it long enough. The auditorium filled fast. Students. Faculty. Families. Strangers. A sea of faces I didn't know, but who, for 20 minutes, were here to listen to me. Me. The kid whose parents forgot his birthday cake. When they introduced me, I walked up to the podium with the binder-thick nerves of someone pretending he wasn't about to expose his entire childhood trauma to 300 people and a live stream. I told my story plainly. Not with theatrics. Not with bitterness. Just truth. I talked about growing up in a home where I felt more like a guest than a son. About leaving on my 18th birthday with a backpack and a bruised rib. About sleeping in shelters, working overtime shifts, teaching myself spreadsheets at the library to stay warm. About getting into community college through sheer stubbornness and a financial aid officer who took pity on me. About building a life that wasn't handed to me, one I carved out with my own exhausted hands. And I saw faces changing while I spoke. Surprise. Recognition. Sympathy. Respect. When I finished, the applause hit like a physical warmth. I wasn't used to being seen, not like this, and it felt like sunlight landing on skin that's only known shadows. Afterward, students lined up to talk to me. Faculty asked if I'd consider mentoring. The communications department snapped photos. They posted the full video online that night with the caption, Nolan Davis, Resilience in Motion. Within 24 hours, it had been shared nearly 100 times. Within 48, old teachers from high school were commenting. By day 3, people from my hometown were sending it around like juicy gossip wrapped in inspiration. And inevitably, because small towns are basically surveillance networks with property taxes, it landed in front of my parents. My mom commented under one of the shared posts. This is full of exaggerations. Some people don't appreciate what their families sacrifice. Sacrifice? They sacrificed cake. For Evan. But her comment wasn't angry. It was rattled. She wasn't defending me, she was defending the image of our family. And when image cracks, people panic. The cracks, by that point, were starting to widen. Because while my story was spreading, my anonymous packet was spreading too. The buyers of the house got it 3 days before their final inspection. The timing was intentional. The impact was immediate. They pulled out. Fast. Once a buyer's inspector documents water intrusion and undisclosed foundation issues, the entire burden shifts onto the seller. Legally. Permanently. The listing agent had to update the disclosure file. Could no longer hide the problems. Could no longer pretend the basement wasn't a shallow indoor lake every spring. Suddenly, the house wasn't a move-in ready gem. It was a lawsuit waiting for an enthusiastic plaintiff. And real estate agents? They talk. Like barbershop level talk. Other buyers backed off. Lenders hesitated. The listing quietly vanished. Behind the scenes, their mortgage was past due. Behind those scenes, they were 4 payments behind. Behind those scenes, foreclosure paperwork was already warming up in the bullpen. But karma wasn't done. Because Evan, sweet, arrogant Evan, was waiting for acceptance emails. And then, your application is under further review. Your scholarship status has been delayed pending verification. Please provide supporting documents for your volunteer hours. Nothing overt. Nothing explosive. But enough to light him up with dread. He posted a disappearing story. I only saw it because someone screenshotted it. Someone's messing with me. I know who. He didn't. That was the point. For the first time in his life, Evan felt untouchable with nothing to touch. Months of academic wins were unraveling thread by thread. Their house was sinking financially. Evan's future was wobbling. My story was everywhere. And I hadn't even said their names. That was the part that got them. They weren't losing because I attacked them. They were losing because I let the truth breathe. And the truth? The truth has never liked them. 3 weeks after the showcase, after my speech video made enough rounds to qualify as local folklore, after the house sale collapsed, after Evan's admissions files started resembling a police investigation, they showed up. Not with warning. Not with an apology. Just with headlights in my eyes as I walked home from my campus job on a Tuesday night. I saw the shapes before the faces. 2 silhouettes standing by the brick archway of my apartment building. For a half-second I thought they were Jehovah's Witnesses or those students trying to get you to donate to a temporary environmental club that's existed since 1984. But no. It was them. My mother in her performative calm stance, hands folded like she was praying for better children. My father looking smaller. Deflated. Like someone had unplugged him. Nolan, he said, voice already cracking. We need to talk. I'd imagined this moment dozens of times. In some fantasies, I told them off. In others, I walked right past them without blinking. And in a few, a conveniently timed sprinkler system turned on and sprayed them both directly in the face. Real life was quieter. I stopped 3 steps away and said, Now? After everything? My mother stepped forward like she was approaching a frightened deer, except I wasn't frightened, and she was the one with shaking hands. We know you've been upset, she started. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. Upset? That's the word we're using? My dad swallowed hard. We didn't know things would get this bad. And there it was, the sentence that revealed everything. Not, we're sorry. Not, we hurt you. Not, we should have protected you. Just, we didn't know we'd pay for it. Right, I said. Because if you suffer, suddenly it's a crisis. They flinched at that. Good. My mom tried again. We understand now that we made mistakes. Mistakes. Like forgetting to buy milk. You didn't make mistakes, I said. You made choices. Every day. For 18 years. My dad's eyes went glassy. Nolan, we're losing the house. I know, I replied calmly. Should have disclosed the foundation damage. They froze. My mother's face drained. My father's shoulders tensed like he was bracing for an impact he knew he deserved. You, he whispered. You did this? I shrugged. I didn't forge anything. I didn't lie. I just told the truth. Something you two should try sometime. My mom's voice broke. We could lose everything. Evan's scholarship offers. We're built on cheating, I said. Colleges don't love that. She covered her mouth, gasping like I'd stabbed her in broad daylight. Why are you doing this? She whispered. And there it was. The line people always say when consequences arrive. Why are you doing this to us? As if they hadn't done it first. I'm not doing anything to you, I said, and honestly I felt it. You pushed me out. You beat me down. You tried to tank my college chances. You trashed my childhood. And when I built a life anyway, you tried to pretend it had nothing to do with you. They stared like they were seeing me for the first time. And realizing the version of me they used to control didn't live here anymore. My dad stepped closer, desperate. We just need help. Just to get through the next few months. Maybe you could co-sign. No, I said immediately. Or a small loan. No. We're your parents. I shook my head slowly. You stopped being my parents the day you threw me out and called me a failure. You stopped being my parents the second you chose Evan's comfort over my survival. You stopped being my parents when you tried to sabotage my future. The silence that followed was heavy. Unavoidable. Honest. My mom broke it first, tears trembling on her lashes. Please. Nolan. We're begging you. I pulled out my phone. Opened the photo from the showcase, me on stage holding the award they never believed I deserved. This is what I built without you, I said. This is who I became after you threw me away. Their eyes flicked to the picture like it was burning them. And whatever you're losing now, I added. That's called consequences. I walked past them toward the door. My dad reached for my arm, not violently, just desperately. Don't, I said quietly. Don't ever touch me again. He let go instantly. I stepped inside. Locked the door. Listened as their muffled voices faded down the walkway and into the dark. That was the last time I saw them in person. Life didn't collapse after that. Theirs did. The house went into foreclosure within months. They moved into a cramped rental near the highway. My dad picked up delivery shifts on weekends. Evan transferred schools, working part-time at a call center to scrape together tuition. They sent birthday texts. Holiday greetings. Generic. Hope you're well. Messages. Never an actual apology. Never acknowledgement. Just sentimental fishing lines tossed into a lake they drained themselves. I never replied. Meanwhile, I kept climbing. And then, on a spring morning 2 years later, I found myself walking across a stage in a cap and gown, diploma in hand, my name called with honors. Applause rose around me. Not a single clap belonged to them. And I didn't need it. Because I'd finally learned something. Family isn't who raises you. Family is who doesn't try to break you. Graduating at 22 should have felt like an ending, but for me it felt like stepping through a door I'd been building plank by plank since the night I left home with a backpack and a bruised rib. My diploma wasn't just paper. It was proof that I could build a life from scraps, from nothing, from the parts of myself nobody ever bothered to notice. I walked off that stage into a future that finally felt like mine. A real job offer came 2 weeks later, operations assistant for a regional logistics firm, the kind of position they don't give to people who they think will break under pressure. I moved into a clean, modest apartment with windows that didn't rattle in the wind and a bed that didn't smell like old motor oil. I bought dishes that matched. Groceries that didn't come from a clearance rack. A cheap plant that I kept alive entirely out of spite. My world expanded quietly, steadily. I went out with friends from work, joined a campus alumni group, learned to cook something more advanced than microwaved pasta. People asked about my story sometimes, and I told it without bitterness. Just truth. Truth is easier to carry when you're not dragging anyone behind you. My parents tried to drift back into my orbit a few times. A birthday text the next year. A proud of you message after someone tagged them in an article about first-gen graduates. A holiday card with a typed note that read, "We miss you. We hope you'll come around." But they never apologized. Not for the birthday. Not for the beating. Not for the sabotage. Not for the 18 years of small cuts they pretended were parenting. And I had learned, painfully, beautifully, that reconciliation without accountability is just another form of control. So I didn't answer. The foreclosure went through in the fall. The bank took the house, the hedges, the perfect curb appeal. Evan's scholarship offers dried up completely. He transferred schools again, this time to somewhere less selective, working part-time to keep up with tuition he'd once assumed was his birthright. Meanwhile, I got promoted. Then promoted again. My boss told me I had a talent for building stability out of chaos. Yeah. I'd had practice. And the best part? I didn't need to watch them fall apart. I didn't need revenge updates. Life took care of its own symmetry. They had made me invisible. I learned how to live without being seen. Then I learned how to succeed without needing witnesses. The people who became my real family, mentors, coworkers, the landlord who rented me the shed, friends who saw value where my parents saw inconvenience. They showed up when it mattered. They showed up for the small wins, the big leaps, the hard days. Years later, when people ask what changed everything for me, I tell them the truth. It wasn't leaving home. It wasn't sleeping in a shelter. It wasn't even the night my dad swung at me. It was the moment I realized I didn't need to be the son they wanted. I only needed to become the person I deserved to be. And once I learned that, they couldn't touch me anymore.